This week, we talked about it last week, but this week you guys began your discussions on reopening the jail facility downtown at the police headquarters. Where did that conversation end up this week?
You will see a vote later this afternoon that looks to reopen the booking facility that formerly existed on the 8th floor of KCPD headquarters. It will allow up to 144 spaces, and the goal is not necessarily that we can solve every issue as it relates to detention. We will need a bigger detention and rehabilitation facility, but this gives 144 spaces for arrestees. This answers in many ways my view, and at least I've heard it from the public. I was on a back and forth with a guy on LinkedIn last night about it. There are claims sometimes that people don't get arrested in Kansas City because there's nowhere for an arrestee to go. My hope is that this says, all right, this is a step one in saying anybody who gets arrested, no matter what the issue, there is somewhere to book them, there is somewhere to take them, at least for a short while. There is a way to make sure that we're intervening in their misconduct, and that should never be an excuse in Kansas City again for us not making sure that certain people get off the streets. The next step of this conversation is to make sure they get off the streets for as long as they need to get off the streets, and that's an important part of what we have ahead.
So do you feel like this vote will pass with flying colors, or is it going to be up in the air?
It's going to pass with flying colors. I'm very proud of it. I introduced this as soon as we got back to City Council after the Labor Day recess. It frankly flew through committee. There were some questions, and I get it because we're spending a lot of taxpayer money, but I expect it to pass City Council, if not unanimously, then close. I think there's this misperception that the leadership of this city doesn't care about public safety. And even if you think we're all the worst people and a bunch of wild blue dots, all of our families live here, particularly our extended families. Nobody wants our families who own businesses, our families who walk to school, or you to be victims of violent crime or to be victims of any crime. And so I think you will see that pass today. Another step, I think, in the right direction of building a safer city.
Is this, and I don't want to call it an admission, but is this coming to a conclusion at least that the pendulum in the wake of George Floyd swung too far to the left?
No, only if you're someone who absolutely likes all nuance. I mean, I think that those who actually understand that there is a balance to everything that we deal with understands that enforcement has always been an important part of what we do. People act as if this city is run by, the most leading left lights of AOC or Cori Bush or anything under the sun, and I don't think that's accurate. It never has been. I think that people understood that you do need to make sure you have a community that trusts the police, that calls the police. And by the way, that community that trusts police, yes, there are many people who call the police all the time. That's absolutely right. But you also need 15-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds who live in the inner city who will talk to the police, who will actually report crimes, who will build positive relationships with it. It can't just be somebody who's like my mom in her 60s, right, and very comfortable with them and talking to them. We need all. And so I think for those who have tried to say collaboration is important, that all of the other parts of police community relations are important, they were not wrong. But I also think that detention is an important part. More acutely to Kansas City, I don't think there's ever been a problem in recent years of asking for more accountability, which at its core, some of you will call it defund. I think that's absolutely a lie. But I think that when you talk about state control, local control, it's really about to what extent is there accountability in how we handle things. And I think when you talk about where money is spent, I continue to support very robust police budgets. But let's be honest, and you and I have talked about this for weeks and weeks now, when there are 14-year-olds that are committing incredibly heinous acts of violence, yeah, we can say we'll enforce them even more and throw them away in prison forever. Sure, and many probably need to be there. But that also begs the question, what were you doing at 12, 11, 13, 10, and 9? And I think a smart city recognizes that it takes both, so you prevent these young people from committing crimes. So that's how I see much of the discourse of recent years.
It does feel like things, though, are moving back to being supportive, pro-law enforcement. I mean, let's not forget, summer of 2020, the city council, of which you were the leader of, basically told folks who were breaking the law that, you know what, we're going to wipe the records clean and you just go on your merry way. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I think we think back to and say today, that would not happen today in Kansas City. That was a sign of that moment in time. Is that fair?
I think that is a gross exaggeration of the action taken by City Council. It was particularly to one charge that was used heavily on protest-related arrests. Now, I don't know. I mean, your hypothetical rather, is if there was a big giant protest today, would the same thing happen? I would hope not. I would hope there wouldn't be need for a big giant protest today. I think that we have all continued to try to say, how can you support policing in this community to make it a safer place? There have been disagreements on it. But I don't think anybody said that no laws should be enforced. And I think that's been a huge distortion made over recent years.
Mayor Lucas is here on KCMO. So you referenced it, Mayor, the back and forth you had on LinkedIn. It got some local news last night with the owner of the Betty Ray's ice cream store, which was broken into on Tuesday night. So just broadly speaking, you mentioned the detention center that you guys are going to bring back to KCPD headquarters. What else is your message to these small business owners who are now dealing with this issue, it seems like, day after day? It's just a matter of who gets hit and when. What's your message to them this morning on KCMO?
I think, first of all, it's certainly that you empathize for each of them. I mean, right? A business break-in, like a home break-in, like any other offense, is an incredible violation, one that people do not forget, perhaps for a lifetime. So that's why I think you always start with understanding in terms of addressing it. And I feel for that owner. That's actually why I responded to him rather than just, moving along in a day. I think we're always interested to listen to other solutions that people may have. I think that's another important part of what we do. But in terms of other solutions long term, I will continue on what I just said. Enforcement is an important part of what you do. You have to find the people behind these things, particularly given a lot of the similarities of these offenses in recent weeks. One has to think that perhaps either there's a pattern or perhaps consistent offenders relating to it. Prosecution is going to be a part of it too. Some of that is municipal, some of that is the county level. I do believe, and I say this each day, that the municipal prosecutor works directly for ultimately the city manager and city council, and she files charges, almost all of them that she gets. And so I think it is important that people recognize that that is done and that charges will be filed. And I think that's an important step. I disagree perhaps with some takes. The business owner did share on local news last night that perhaps a fund to support small businesses is ineffective. Just because we have additional funding, and by the way, American Rescue Plan helping in some of that, to try to address burglaries in our city doesn't mean that we're not still spending $318 million on KCPD. It doesn't mean we're not almost spending $10 million on corrections in our city municipal court. It doesn't mean separately that the counties in which we sit are spending a lot. I mean, you're looking at probably about $350 to $400 million that's on the enforcement and prosecution side each year in Kansas City. Us throwing on a few extra dollars to say, if you had a window broken, we can try to help you replace it. Or if you need security cameras because you're spending a lot and have narrow margins, I think that is nothing but a good thing. And that's why we have said time and again, this isn't supposed to say the fix to crime is that somebody comes and fixes your window for you. It does say, we understand you and we're going to use every dollar we can to make sure business is comfortable staying in Kansas City.
Now, speaking of business staying in Kansas City, this some people are going to see this or maybe hear this and their eyes are going to glaze over, but I do think it matters. So I want to ask you why the small business owner and the Kansas City resident should care about this, and that is the increase of your credit rating in Kansas City to AA. It's not AAA, but it's obviously getting better. What does that mean to the Kansas City resident, and why should they care about that?
You are trying to get eyes to glaze over this hour of the morning. I think long-term, the solution for how you can address any number of issues in a city, how you build bridges, how you hire people, is that you have solid credit. And us making sure that Kansas City can pay its bills, can accurately and I think responsibly take out debt obligations, but pays them back, shows that this is a city that's well run. It's a city that's able to get 300,000 new trash and recycling bins for every single family residence. It's a city that's able to resurface more roads. And note that Broadway, Warnell, and a few others, those are utility issues. We're looking to get those done soon with our utility partners. I mean, this is Kansas City working at its best. I've talked to a lot of people. Kansas City, if we can address the public safety concerns, I think it is really one of the greatest places in America to live. And we're going to continue to do our finance side here at City Hall to make sure that we're doing it.
Does it mean anything regarding the Royals' future and the city potentially being part of this project and using that increase in bond rating to potentially take out some debt on behalf of whatever the team wants to build?
Oh, how fascinating. I didn't even think about that take. Look, good credit's good credit. I would hope that many of your listeners try and strive. I do in my own family household to make sure we have good credit. It doesn't mean we're buying a new car. It may mean that we can. It may mean that we can buy a new house, but I think on the whole, I try to make sure I maintain my credit. I tried 2 years before as a married man with this nice house in which we live. And I hope that the city is living the same way. What I promise to my successors is that we actually will make sure our money's right, that they don't have to lay off employees, that they don't have to cut budgets like public safety. And that's what this type of rating allows us.
All right. Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you as always for the time. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you at the Plaza Art Fair.
That's right. Coming up this weekend. There you go. Quinton Lucas on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We are streaming on the iHeart app. Just search KCMO Talk Radio. We will have the owner, by the way, of Betty Ray's coming on next hour.